Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for the final Axton reading of the fall semester. I'm Christy Maxwell, the Director of Creative Writing here at the University of Louisville. The Axton Reading Series is made possible through the generous support of Anne and William Axton. After tonight's reading, you are invited to join us at 10 a.m. tomorrow on Zoom for the Axton Workshop, where the work of students Maria Jose Galindo Chavez, Araya Harbin, Emily Sledge, and Matthew Stuber will be up for discussion. These are all exciting packets of poems, so I encourage you to attend. If you'd like a PDF, you can send an email to the Assistant Director of Creative Writing, Carrie Callahan. Carrie, perhaps you'll drop your email in the chat at some point for people who are interested in procuring that PDF. And now we'll move on to the introduction. Oliver Baez Bendorf is the author of Consider the Rooster, Night Boat Books 2024, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, the CLMP Firecracker Award, and the Lambda Award for Transgender Poetry, and named a Best Poetry Book of 2024 by both Electric Literature and Literary Hub. His earlier collections are Advantages of Being Evergreen, winner of the Cleveland State University Poetry Center Open Book Prize, and The Spectral Wilderness, selected by Mark Doty for the Stan and Tom Wick Poetry Prize. In regard to his most recent book, we were just chatting about this before everyone signed in. Let me just hold it up. It takes up the whole screen here. It's a very hefty horizontal book. So in regard to his most recent book, reviewers are never remiss to discuss its shape, specifically its landscape or horizontal orientation, through which the book issues the question of positionality, of how one is positioned in the world before one even opens it. The wide pages orienting us toward the expansive rather than narrow, widening the center and challenging traditional margins. In discussion with Raquel Salas Rivera, Baez Bendorf states of the writing of Consider the Rooster, the more I wrote, my cat's chirping over here, sorry, wants to join the chorus. The more I wrote, the more I started seeing themes emerge, the land around me, finding shapes as bodies amid disruption, life and land beyond regulation, the natural world of which we are part, resisting binaries and boxes. The poems began to talk to each other and formed around shared gravity, survival, an ungovernable joy, a refusal to be good, end quote. In a period of rampant trans erasure and persecution, the book's foregrounding of transness is vital, as is transness itself. In the poem, Gone If We Can Figure Out Where, he writes, my aesthetic after all this time is, I'm still here. Many of my students will recall their introduction to Baez Bendorf's work through the poems he identifies as speculative ekphrasis, prose poems that describe non-existent or not yet existing multimedia visual art pieces. In I Want Biodegradable Sex, one of these pieces, he writes, trans is a way of arranging the world through change. Reading this, I'm taken back to the hours following the first time I saw Baez Bendorf present his poems at a featured reading at the 2019 New Orleans Poetry Festival. Exuberantly journaling in the candle-bright interior of Lafitte's afterword, I wrote, transness as a medium for living, poetry as a trans medium. Is poetry inherently trans, relying as it does on metaphor and repetition with difference, which is to say, relying as it does on transformation? I share this reminiscence to illustrate the critical creative entanglement Oliver nourishes in his poetry, in which eyes sprout limbs and we better understand why and how to look is to behold, to beholding, retrofitting the verb to the noun. Among other roosters and reference, the rooster in the title Consider the Rooster, deceptively singular, refers to Baez Bendorf's rooster Walter Mercado, though I hesitate to use the possessive here, wanting to say instead perhaps the rooster with whom Baez Bendorf was in community, with whom Baez Bendorf shared space. This is a poet who asks us to pay this kind of attention to formations of power in language. In the Poetry Society of America's series, In Their Own Words, Baez Bendorf relays the story of Walter's becoming. Tractor Supply had said there were no roosters among the baby chicks brought home. Yes, Walter was assigned female at birth and policed out of his neighborhood when his true self emerged. Sound familiar? Walter Mercado, miniature bantam rooster, mythological trans mask. He was beautiful, iridescent, tough as nails. He dazzled. He didn't take shit from anybody. End quote. Discussing his neighbors' varied responses to the crowing of the rooster, assessing their differences, he states, Walter's crow revealed who feels entitled to dictate which presences are allowed, exposing the unspoken rules of who can occupy space and make their presence felt. Reading about Walter's crow, I kept misreading it as the bird of the bird. The crow as a bird, not a sound a bird makes, an intermeshing of different kinds of birdness, which seems right for the investments of the book and sound's transformation to form and form's transformation to sound, a malleability that is part of the book's ethos, the strength not to be broken in the act of being reshaped, a resilience. The generative potential of misreading emerges explicitly in the book when Baez Bendorf writes of his own typo, transplanting trees for trans in the phrase trees and non-binary, recasting also the book's trees in terms of their trans kinship, a happy palimpsest, helping us understand their becoming and seasonal metamorphoses in ways that might tutor our own. There's so much to say about Baez Bendorf's work, but after a certain point, we need to probably just be with the poems. After all, we've been invited to, as the first poem announces, doors open, soup's on. So thanks for welcoming us, Oliver. Now let us welcome you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Wherever you're tuning in from, Christy, thank you for that beautiful, generous, and thoughtful introduction. Wow. I really appreciate it. Uh, I before I begin, I wanted to acknowledge the difficult news out of Louisville this week. It's been, I can only imagine, a heavy few days for many who are here, and I'm grateful that we can still gather, and I'm holding everyone who is affected, close in mind tonight. So, um, I'm joining you from exile. I left the States earlier this year, and it's deeply meaningful to be able to join you and be here together and um invite you into my space while you have also invited me into yours tonight. From where I live now and where I currently make my creative practice. Tonight, I will read mostly from my third book, Consider the Rooster, which I wrote in a time uh, of both clarity and uncertainty. Are there any other kinds of times? Maybe. We don't have to solve that right now. But these poems, and for me, the memory of the rooster, Walter Mercado, at the heart of them are still teaching me, what it means to belong and to a body, to a field, and to each other. Uh, I'll read for about a half an hour, and then we can open it up for questions or conversation. Colony collapse begins without shelter in a storm. What I have to do next. I sleep best at anyone else's house. I like the ones that bees like. I think madness is colonization. I know grace is how I'm still alive. Shock of blue jay on an oxidized fence. I try to make a religious exception. Don't die of perfectionism. Heave along the goldenrod, begin to live more together. I try to unravel Spanish ways of knowing, for example, crown on my head in an empty field. We plant lavender and let it grow bushy for the bees. Sexy how they feed on blooms. Pleasure, time, money, faith, yucca, evil, each one multiplies. We never eat alone. Come over, I will be a confidential lover to each one of you. Private things, private thoughts. We bake breadcrumbs into royal jelly. I love with every hand, horse, water, wind. If you wonder where to rear the young, if you too fall feverish after that communal feeling, swear to God when I'm dead, I'll spend years waiting for the living to call, offer wine and dance. I need everyone I love. I'm too tired. Time to feed our missing before they come gone. Third eye is a glory hole. Doors open. Soup's on. Becoming particulate. When a voice met the resonant frequency of the object, when the song crashed into glass as invisible waves, at last I began to vibrate. Finally, I exploded like a garage window the year the rooster sang. What was it that rattled me so astrologically? Or does it matter only that I was rattled, propelled from my brittle bunker into a new position, compromised now by such beauty as mist caressing a mountain, or how heavy the satchel of ashes lands against my rib cage? I pray my recollection of the neighbor dissolves into nothing when we leave this town. That however much the song I love rattled him too, that he forgets me entirely, for he exploded in a different way. Something about my mother as I learned to dry plastic baggies upside down. Though I'd never plant grass in a place I'm meant to stay, I try to reach every last seed with my mouth. Now the promise of leaving glows the horizon. Learning to speak the language of mums, I ask myself how the fear of small particles affects my everyday experience. Today I give thanks for the way in pestilence living has gone on. I remember Dilly by her bones, now pulverized like dust of the dead, in whose light we still read our future. All I have is the woods inside my head. Minerva, calm me down. I am trying to remember the way the deer always emerged every time I thought of them, and how bones would surface in the dirt at the marsh. I'm sniffing pine cones back to the forest floor, rubbing fingers together to make moss, smoking toward the orchard where I could never find the owl in the rotting tree. What kind of tree? I can't remember. Years pass. I'm at my desk doing a hormone shot with my cam off and trying to remember. When someone in the webinar on trans femme aesthetics says they don't believe anything's innate, I laugh on mute. I too have been tossing nurture nature in my mind, but who hasn't? Now, what God threw up this unforgettable sunset tonight? I step out to the deck in my trans mask robe because in the end, no one will remember. All that I've named has a life outside of me. On certain days, when the humidity is just right. I remember everything. I regret nothing. Birch tree. Um, those were the first three poems in Consider the Rooster, and I wanted to open there tonight just to root us in. For me, those are poems that root in sound and survival. And from here, moving into a couple of poems that are kind of well, we'll have a middle section here of poems that feel like transformation and community to me. And this one's called Frequently the Woods Are Pink, which is a line from Emily Dickinson. Frequently the woods are pink. For Hank. When I was your age, I played in what I remember as an unending forest. I knew the way in and the way out, but not the perimeter. When it was time for dinner, I'd emerge with longing and relief. I never thought to ask how flowers bloom, or how some buds emerge from almost any point along a twig. Life passed forward as if by sheer proximity, by that and the intrepid carriers of pollen. It is through this magic that I can be an uncle to you and try to impart some of what's good in me. I try to love myself as if I am some imperfectly shaped flower, no less miraculous for being one of many. Somehow, many bad and good things happen, even though it is possible that we, along with asters, are simply stardust trying to know itself again. For the sake of beauty and change, which is also beautiful. Where you and I once lived, horticulturalists cast predictions on when peak cherry bloom will come for the benefit of tourists making plans when people traveled. I always felt that the delight of the prediction was mainly that they could be wrong, that despite their algorithms, something could still elude the most exact approximation humans can buy. By some surprising collusion of sun, rain, wind, temperature, and whether or not anyone dared to sing in the shadows. And we love the blooms for that, for defying us with their own timeline. Feels good to long for them before they open up and recollect their fragrance later. Today, I am 33 years old. You are 7. Today, we are together, we are at the top of some hill, and I am trying to leave you something. To love yourself, as though most of the elements in your body have passed through several supernovas, which they have. Stardust, which is how I am your uncle. Asters in a field. Each one a friend to keep close. I am still learning who my God is. Laid wreaths at many right and wrong altars. How is it that when Estrella wept, her tears became starflowers? They sprang up from the ground below where she felt sorry. Everyone has a different reason why. Mortals stranded in a flood or not enough stars in the sky. Can you imagine wanting even more stars in the sky? It's like wanting more Christmas than the amount of Christmas there already is. My grandmother wanted more Christmas. She and my grandfather traveled to Europe for more Christmas to bring back to Iowa nutcrackers, ornaments, nativity scenes, and candle pyramids. Opened a shop next to their red brick house set back a ways. What I remember most is the tinsel and ribbon, short scraps in every color handed out to me and my sister along with lemon drops. And I canceled my subscription to Ancestry.com. So instead, I'm writing you about the woods, which are pink and brown and powerful. I never read that one at a reading before. We were talking about that a little bit beforehand. Um, Good to mix it up. Will and Testament. I want to be buried under timber and rock, like Caeneus was. I'll be immune to weapons, even once they find original female, soft in the wrong places, scarred. Leave me in a woods somewhere quiet. Let my ribs rattle with the woodpecker's industry. Let the heavens fade lilac to orange on the longest night. I'll leave you candles. May raccoons walk their spidery prints all over the dirt. May berries sprout magic. I leave you my pleasure and joy for which I worked so hard. I wish you lusty longing and rapt attention. Though the twiggy lean-to off the trail is not my property to transfer, I hope you find it. I offer you my bright, dumb hopes for democracy. May your vote always be counted. Your body was made to shift shape, seek to serve. Come visit me where pines loop. Tell me joy you're having. Tangible form. Isn't it amazing the golden needles dropped, how they leave a pad on the ground for your tent? Grove awaits. Already abandoned my body once. Look what happened after. Thank you for the emoji presences. The beasts have been too kind. Season of see-through deciduous, fallen limbs lying in repose. What's unpassable in snowfall is still a simple leap. Please watch your feet on decomposing leaves. Blueberry light stretches swollen fingers between trunks. Din, a brunch. Laundry singes nasal hairs, blocks from any basement. All night, lamplight knocks against my window from the top of the ravine. Though the beasts have been too kind, the barred owl has been asking, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? The terrible moment when one wants to say everything. Offerings, Iphis pledged as a girl and paid as a boy. That's the title of this next poem, and it's also a line from Ovid's Metamorphosis. I'm still like learning how to hold this book when I read, you know. I took for granted my previous books that I could hold with one hand. Uh, Offerings Iphis pledged as a girl and paid as a boy. I called myself a man, which I think I am, so I could talk about how good the crying feels now I've learned to let it. Some days, it's as simple as the way the clouds dry, a watercolor wash set down against the great nothing in colors I choose not to name. I've feared my life transpiring without me, revelations I've been too stubborn or too afraid. I missed two good friends' weddings, caught in the silk of my own misery. We pretend we don't need one another's love on our skin. It's how little I laughed some years. I love the ones I didn't know were coming, lenient clovers. But I also love the jonquils I waited for all winter, each one an orange candle, another wish. For all I've missed, for everything to come, the way all feelings come and go, like rain, which changes the very color of living things. Thank you. Okay, I've got three more poems. And and these three I'll close with. Uh, I'm just gonna read them. I thought maybe by the time I got to that sentence, I would have some kind of synthesis to say, but I'd rather we just experience them. So let's do that. Um, this next one begins with an epigraph uh from Sylvia Rivera, an excerpt from a speech that she gave in 1973 at the Christopher Street Liberation Day rally. Um, and the poem's called Michigan, which is where I was living at the time. You all tell me, go and hide my tail between my legs. I will no longer put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all? Think about that. Sylvia Rivera. Daisy Fleabane arrives early after winter onslaught of lake effect. Snow melt becomes water that feeds wildflowers from the underside, becomes flood, comes family, a cellular structure for secrets. The year is 2020. Everyone is sick and healing. Not everyone. Everyone is sick or healing. Lives are precious or expendable, expelled, expressed, released, sighed, sloughed off to replicate in someone else's precious or expendable lungs. Germination, occupation, months between vagus nerve and a memory of sociality. You might as well be in Michigan. I rolled into a pleasant peninsula seeking safe haven. And yes, sometimes an invisible cloak fits over my house. Cape's children walk by carrying plastic pumpkins. I push grass ordinance to edges. A local construction of crime, legal height lowered. Brace for tensions with neighbors. I mow a tiny strip around the meadow. The pollinator garden tickles the curb with liberated wildflowers. Fleabane daisies, such a startling puff of yellow, pink clover right over, and dock, dead limbs rotting but controlled into compost. We will grow things here. We are in this together. I'll post a sign explaining and pray no one calls on the rooster who rushes to elevation to greet the day or warn of it. All day, the same bugle, meaning something only in his kingdom, which I happen to live in. I surround myself in brown, deck stains and elk and moose of the Michigan flag. State whistle, toad song. Don't you know, sun cooks the shame away. Who else needs to survive? I am trying to answer one question. I measure miles from the arbitrary border, drive through pharma for extra vials of testosterone, controlled substance. RX sees a criminal queer, scrutinizes ID, then dispenses a paper bag folded, closed, and stapled, which I toss, empty passenger seat. sanitize my hands, keep driving, fueled by fossils. North in Michigan. What is the mortgage? Is it a house of cards, a debt meant never to be repaid, token of achievement in settlement's shadow? Am I the last loser in Michigan still banking on silence and pleasantries to protect me? Strangers' neighbors power walk past my ragged lawn. Their yards are dull and starve hummingbirds, monarchs, cardinals, and bees. How is that more beautiful? If I stay in line, if I keep my head down, if I work harder, etc. I have held my tail between my legs and staying grateful. I have been spit on for whose hand I held, harassed for the pants I wore, catcalled for existing. I have been slandered by the God Hates Fags family. I studied their church compound on Google Street View and saw the Pride Center painted in rainbow across the street. I can no longer be placated by the colorful advancement of rights. Depressed to push or pull down. No wonder. An old ordinance still on the books bans fortune telling. Another way I am a criminal here. Between that and the forbidden meadow and some other elements and the privileges I am often permitted, I forgot to assemble, paid on time every month, did homophobia's work by playing Smear the Queer. Sylvia didn't die for me to hide my tail between my legs. So I untether from my respectable nest, holding the X in my hand like a rosary and like a brick. I'm done being good. Thank you. Everything all at once. Right now, someone is having sex, and someone is dying, and someone is trying to find a lid so they can, before bed, put away the soup. And someone is dreaming of that made meadow, and someone is gazing through a hospital window to a faraway peak, and someone can't decide what to watch, so they remain on the menu screen for company. And someone wants to call but can't, and someone wants to answer but won't. And someone is studying to become a moth scientist, and someone is dizzy and doesn't know why. And someone is, after work, practicing the vocal techniques of opera. And someone receives a phone call saying, "Listen, it's my neighbor I told you about, the singing one. Can you hear it?" And someone is clutching the heavy, still warm hand of a lover. And someone is digging a hole. And someone is waxing their back. And someone is remembering a poem, permitting bits and pieces to return. And someone would do almost anything to forget. Okay, I'm going to close with the title poem, uh, Consider the Rooster. And Christy, in your introduction, you actually saved me some of the explanatory context here about the tractor supply backstory. So we can just thanks for that, and we can just get right into it. Um, Consider the Rooster, who did not ask to join this world any more than I did, who scans for trouble as he pecks the ground, who announces when a hawk lands in the naked maple above, who emits a low trill to warn the flock, who does this on instinct to protect potential offspring, who rarely takes a treat when offered scrap or seed, who instead yips to gather the hens around it, who sometimes does this regarding some shiny piece of trash, whose waddle catches light the way red lipstick does, who slept between breasts as a day-old cockerel, whose first attempt to crow sounded like a flopping sock, who directs with one stiff wing, who we thought would be a hen, who reminds all in earshot that, like it or not, another day has come and gone, who disturbs the interior idyll of the neighbor writing lectures on environmental philosophy, who keeps the hens alive to lay another day, who would risk his life to protect, who cockfighters gas up on steroids and provoke to battle, who they then point to as an example of how violence is natural among men, whose crow can scare away the devil and rouse the dead back to life, who will provoke a strong response of either humiliation or joy. God, I won't be your sacred chicken if it means I have to fight, but I will fight. I already scanned the perimeter. Testosterone, yes, I take it, which is not the same as fighting. The shape you see has nothing to do with me or the rooster, who sleeps in a cardboard box in the garage because the philosopher called the police, then asked for eggs. Do you hear that crow that sounds almost like a recording of a crow? That's daybreak. It is regular like daybreak or twilight. It rattles a certain window that matches its vibrational frequency because the glass, under all that strain of air molecules around it, finally decides to change. Thank you for being here and for making this field of connection tonight together possible across the distance.
Thank you so much. That was so spectacular. I'm so happy that you read the title poem. It's so like the book in general. You're so good at hitting those, like the book's very serious, but then there's such kind of joy and humor throughout too, and it's just such a wonderful and remarkable balance. So
Mhm.
many remarkable things happening in the book. If people want to turn your cameras on so Oliver can see who's been sitting here, feel welcome to. We're going to move into a short Q&A, and you're welcome to raise your hand and we can call on you, or you can also type something into the chat, whatever you would prefer. While people kind of gather their thoughts, I can kind of kick us off. I mean, I have so many questions, just so many things that are the book is in 6 parts. This might be an easy kind of place to start. Do you want to talk some about how you organized this um, very kind of long book of poems?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. And this book, I'm a huge fan of revision, you know, and the manuscript, how it was structured and its sections in particular, um, went through a pretty significant revision between the manuscript as I sent it originally to Nightboat and what is the book now. Um, and I feel really fortunate to have worked with an editor at the press who was very encouraging of, you write a book and you turn it in and then life keeps unfolding and and so in that it was in that revision process that it was really like um how can I put this book together in a way that is in that spirit of change is always happening, and for this book, for example, it didn't feel right to kind of um have the structure itself suggest a kind of it would have been easy but not true to put a book together that just sort of seemed chronologically or spatially kind of clear in like the changes that unfold. Um, but that wasn't this book, and so it was really in revision that the sections proliferated and things got reorganized, and that was also when I sort of took it to a bit of a citational excess with bringing in, epigraphs for each section, sometimes multiple, and just really wanting to kind of make visible that process too of like what I was reading and who I was in conversation with. And in the end, I tried to just put together sections that, felt like little packets or little books themselves, and then kind of stack those together, until it just felt right. Um, yeah, it's always a fun part of the process when you've written these poems and then the poems they don't individually have to do everything on their own. They get to work together. And the questions of, well, how do I want to put you together to have something happen?
It's interesting to hear you say that because it does feel like, in some ways, like kind of like Anne Carson's collection of chapbooks or something, but they work also cohesively. So that's interesting. Um, I have a question in here in the chat from Emily, who is in the workshop tomorrow. Could you tell us about your engagement with the changing animal, natural, sensual, and emotional body in these poems, and how it propels the collection? Consider the Rooster.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily, and really looking forward to the workshop tomorrow. I mean, I think that my engagement with those things in these poems are ideally uh related to my engagement with those things in life, in the world. And um we the world which we experience through our senses, um as much as I just think I can live up here sometimes. um and the changing animal, natural, sensual, emotional body, um relationships, ecologies between all of those things. There's also, I mean, everything that you named in this beautiful question are things that there's transformation there, right? And that's what life keeps offering me. And I think change is the most consistent teacher that I've had, and so I just, uh, try to stick close to that, I guess. Thanks.
Any other
And I guess something briefly I would add about that too is just because how it propels the collection is, um I just wanted to share a Gwendolyn Brooks quote that I'm always returning to, and it's just that she reminds us that poetry is life distilled, and that life is not always, I might get these out of order, that life is not always neat or orderly or happy, or she rattles off a few things, and I think is partly what I'm trying to get at, that poetry is life, life distilled, and all of the stuff of life can also be in poetry. Thanks. What else?
other questions and comments?
I'm happy to talk about my process or my themes or advice, writing advice, or any such thing,
We
or
have a
just
question here about who or what would you consider to be some of your inspirations?
yeah. Um, Walter Mercado, uh, trees, um, uh, the wind, um, uh, music, um, and uh, so many living poets. Um, We're just so lucky. We're so lucky to live in a time of such poetry. Um, a lot of different writers have been influential for me at different moments and in different ways. From Jack Gilbert to Gloria Anzaldúa and Emily Dickinson to Federico Garcia Lorca. Um, and and also just um the little strange miracles of daily life, the weird simultaneities of life and form and color um that that each season brings.
You're a visual artist alongside a poet. How does the visual art practice find its way into the writing practice?
Yeah. Drawing, I mean, drawing and writing, they feel very related to me, and sometimes like seamless extensions of the other one, but also sometimes like drawing is a way of, I mean, I think a lot of us as poets and writers are interested in exploring and really been finding out like what can language do, right? Where are its like edges? Like, and drawing, I feel like gives me another way to understand that about writing. Um, and and also a place, a language beyond words. And all of it comes together in a notebook praxis that I think, I took a workshop with Linda Berry when I was doing my MFA in poetry. And before that workshop, I hadn't, everyone draws as a kid, and then I stopped at some point, and 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 it was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. So I'm super happy to be drawing, and it's the relationship with writing it's a very curious and very fascinating one to me, between the different lines, the different types of lines and the different types of images, um and uh but I think anything that we can do that is creative is great.
Yeah. It's great to hear you talk about kind of the edges of language. I'm thinking about like obviously the edges of so many of the poems via the line break, but especially that very the narrow one of the most narrow sestinas I've seen, not quite the narrowest, but a very narrow sestina. So um making a difficult form in some ways even more difficult. But what a beautiful poem in the collection that is. Alan, would you like to ask this question or do you want me to read it? Read it? So Alan, one of our retired colleagues here says, I'm somewhat embarrassed to sound like a retired English professor, which I am here, but I'm struck by what I hear as the very delicately managed allusions to citations of talking back to and with earlier and often non-heteronormative poets. The one you didn't hear, Alan, if you haven't spent much time in the book, Elizabeth Bishop plays a very kind of intertextual role in this book. Ovid, Duncan, Consider the Rooster in conversation with Christopher Smart. Can you talk a little about how that non-hetero thread running through the so-called canon informs your work?
Yeah. Hi, Alan. Thanks for this question. And for your these observations completely. I mean, for me, this speaks also to the poetry being life distilled. Like, for me, these references in the book are emerging from, uh, the what I'm reading, kind of who I'm reading, thinking alongside, thinking about. Um, and that is intentional. I consider myself to write in the mode of queer poetics, which is one thing we can say about it is it's eclectic, right? Um, there's a lot of different types of styles and aesthetics and modalities sort of at that party. Um, the party of queer poets throughout history. So it's intentional, but and also it's, like Dickinson and Whitman are like often, referred to as sort of like the parental figures of like US American poetry, right? And I think um many times maybe by people who didn't even know that, there's queerness there with both of them. So it's a little hard to avoid. I mean, I think you'd have to go out of your way, I think. But for me, it's definitely intentional, um, and it's about, uh, who my poems are in conversation with, who I'm um inspired by, also about the question of inspiration as well. So, yeah, that though Sylvia Rivera, there's a quote, there's a David Wojnarowicz epigraph somewhere. Um,
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we are kind of coming to a close, and um, I know a Q&A can be a little exhausting. You're kind of thrown on the spot, but thank you for entertaining these questions and for such a gorgeous reading. If we can do something to
My
give some
pleasure.
applause to show our gratitude and enjoyment of this reading, that would be
Thank you.
fantastic. Yes, thank you. I'm
Thank
gonna
you. Truly my pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
And again, everyone is welcome to join the workshop tomorrow from 10 to noon. Carrie has the PDF if you would like to get it ahead of time so that you can skim it at least if you're not one of the primary workshop attendees. And we encourage you to join us. And thank you so much for using your time in this way tonight, and have a good night.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone.
Good
Look
night.
forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.